Hello, everybody. Once again, I'm Liam Crafton Jr., aka Zorvelch on Less Than Guru. We have Mars, the video cat, here who keeps wanting to hit my microphone, so sorry if the sound goes weird because of that. But today, for Palladium, I would like to talk about the Paladin. So, I've stated before that I have taken the Paladin, and I understood it in, let me go back. I understood in the original game they didn't want it to be a Paladin like the D&D Paladin. And it was basically like a super knight. So the knight had some pretty high attribute requirements. And like PP and PS, if you got a little bit more, there was like two that if you got a couple of points better than the knight, you could be a paladin. And then the paladin basically got a little bit better of everything than the knight. And better is a little bit subjective. The paladin hand to hand, you got up to +6 damage, where the knight only had +5 damage, and I believe the paladin might have had a point less for a parry dodge bonus, where the knight got higher. The knight might have had a little bit different. Sorry if you heard that. There's horns honking. The knight might have gotten a few things, maybe a couple little things better within horsemanship. But for the skill bonuses and for everything else, it was basically like they were equivalent occupational character classes, where the paladin was just a little bit bigger. And then in Palladium 2nd edition, they did go with the paladin, got some special abilities to do things like the demon death blow, and very close, probably inspired by the Cyber Knight from Rifts. So when I was going through my rewrite and I was looking in Yin Sloth jungles, I knew for a fact I did not want the Undead Hunter and the Witch Hunter, because to me those are very different occupational character classes than the rest of first edition. They almost seem like they would fit more into a second edition Palladium game. They got a bunch of magic stuff. They got like the higher equivalents for hand-to-hand combat and things like that. I successfully brought in a first level, it's either a witch or undead hunter, and with their magic stuff that they got under equipment and their skills and their fighting and stuff, they were equivalent to a 4th or 5th level other character. So I immediately determined I did not want that at all. You could take a man of arms or anything and turn it into a character that hunted witches, beloveds in my game, or undead, but I didn't like those two occupational characters for my play of my table in Palladium First Edition. The Holy Crusader was different. The Holy Crusader was one that I looked at and I'm like, okay, I kind of see it fits. But again, after the list in Palladium First Edition, where they said these are men of arms, these are your men of magic, these are your clergy, they never explained afterwards like where that Holy Crusader came in. How much of a clergy was it, or was it not? It was a lot of ambiguity into it. And that was one thing that I wanted to eliminate. And even though I understood the difference between the knight and the paladin being like, the paladin being a little better knight, I decided to remove the paladin from the men of arms and bring them over to the clergy and combine them with the Holy Crusader. So I kept the skills, the hand-to-hand, etc. of the paladin from first edition, but I brought the spell casting ability from the Holy Crusader and brought it and combined it, and that's how I came up with my Palladium rewrite of the Paladin. So I wanted to go through here. This is, again, a combination of man of arms with my clergy, If you want to look to see how I did it with entertainers, you can look at my gladiator video. If you want to see how I did it with my academics, you can check out the sword mage video. But this is the clergy version of a divine man of arms clergy. So Paladin attribute requirements straight from Palladium. I kept them the same: IQ of 10, PE of 10, PP of 12, and PS of 12. Alignment any. I allow the paladins to be part of, if there is a war god, evil war god. Malia is in my game. She's the evil war goddess of vengeance. They could be a paladin of that. It's not necessarily have to be good or anything. The other thing is the knights have the code of chivalry. Paladins linked with gods of light often use it, but it's not a necessity. And they both have orders, but paladin orders are holy orders, and knight orders are secular orders. So let's continue further. Physical conditioning +8. That's the highest. They're full men of arms type combatants. They're full physical combatants, I'll say that. So they get the full physical conditioning of +8. Armor tier is 1 because they are trained martially to wear heavy armor. So they have the least amount of restrictions. The restrictions they have is they can go into other clergy occupations only if their deity allows them. So right off the bat, I know the war god, the good war god of justice, and that is Czar, and he only allows clerics and priests, or sorry, clerics and paladins. He does not allow priests. So if you were a paladin of Czar, you could not become a priest of Czar, but you could if you wish to become a cleric of Czar. So that's what they get. They start off with hand-to-hand paladin, which is pretty much almost identical to how it is in Palladium First Edition. Horsemanship paladin. They get large shield and lance. Mars is sitting on my keyboard, and I hope he didn't stop anything. It looks like we're going, so he decided to be distracting. Let's look at the level chart. Level 1, same as everything. These are your elective and secondary skills. Level 2, harming touch. This was not inspired by the D&D Divine Smite. It just ended up being on a completely different path. It ended up being close to it. When we get over to it, I'll explain my path and my reasoning by why I do it the way that I do it. So level 3 and 4 gain some more skills. 5, that's like very much similar to the Holy Crusader. That's when they first gain spells. So that's when paladins gain prayers. Again, I have fluff, divine, prayers, invocations, mechanics, their spells. So that's where I differentiate between the two. At level 6, I gave them penance. That was something that I really liked about the shaman and priest characters, occupational character classes in Palladium First Edition. And instead of just throwing in a bunch of hit points and a lot of shock points, as I did with my men of arms, I decided to give paladins penance. I thought it fit well with the concept, and then it made them a little bit different for that. And then at level 7, they gain a squire. It goes back to the old school D&D games when your paladins and fighters, after and other things, they would gain followers, gain squires. So I allow them to gain a squire. Sort of also like how druids can gain familiars, and some of them can gain greater familiars. So you gain a person who is a squire that will be your squire. Just like that concept. I believe knights get it at 6th level. Paladins have to wait till 7th level. Level 8, choose 3 elective skills. You get a couple of additional hit points. Choose some secondary skills at level 10. Gain additional shot points. More. Elective skills at level 12. Level 2 is additional hit points. Mental conditioning. So we'll see what that is at level 14. And then at level 15, a couple of additional shock. Elective secondary skill choices. Exactly how Palladium present them. Elective skills, these are the skills that you are allowed to get. Secondary skills, you can choose any secondary skill from the general secondary skill list, but these are the ones that give you bonuses. So let's get to the abilities, combat training. So, as I stated before, like in my Sword Mage, in my Gladiator, and in my Cleric videos, my men of arms have the best automatic parry by far. They can parry any attack that comes at them. And then if they fail, and except for ranged attacks, they might need a shield, but they theoretically can attack any attack that or can parry any attack coming at them as long as they're aware. And I'll say they have the right equipment for it. All the other martial-ish characters in the other categories have something to replace it, but it's a little less. So with the Paladin, what they are is they are allowed to get the automatic parry of a man of arms, but if the parry fails, they may not spend an action to dodge afterwards unless the Paladin uses a shield to parry. So the Cleric just could not parry afterwards, or could not dodge afterwards on a failed parry. And that's the bonus for the Men of Arms. The Men of Arms, they get an automatic parry, doesn't take an action. If they fail that parry, they can choose to expend an action to dodge as a last-ditch effort to not take damage. The Paladins can't do that unless they have a shield. So it kind of locks the Paladins down to a shield, which makes sense. Paladin, sword, shield, and they get the large shield occupational skill automatically. So it kind of fits that concept, and it's a little bit better than a cleric because my Paladin was my full combative clergy, where my cleric was a middle ground between the priest and the Paladin. So that's where their combat training is. Harmful Smite at second level. This did start off as the Harming Touch ability from the Holy Crusader in the Palladium First Edition Yin Sloth Jungle Book, and even EverQuest has a Harming Touch type ability on their Shadow Knights, is what they're called in EverQuest, which was a game that I was really into back in the day. But it required a bare hand. And what I found was in play, it broke the idea, the mythology, the lore, the feels of a paladin who is sword and shield, sheathing or dropping or putting away their sword to try to touch somebody and pat them on the head, and then redraw their sword, pick up their sword, or whatever. And I didn't want it necessarily to stack with their sword and have it go through their sword at that power level. So I brought the power level down, but I have it channeling through the shield as a harming smite. That it's extra damage added to their sword or their weapon damage, their melee weapon. So the paladin adds half their paladin level to any, and it's always round down in my game, unless stated otherwise. So at first level, it's not going to do any extra damage. So it's not a first level ability. It's a second level ability. At second level, they're going to roll their damage and they're going to add 1 more point for their harming smite. At level 4, they're going to add 2 points to their smite. So against normal things, it's going to be a few points. But I did keep that it can't be used with natural thrown or ranged weapons. So if I have, say, a Minotaur with horns, he's not going to be able to use that with his claws, won't be able to be used for it. They can't throw something with it. It has to be through a melee weapon. It's just part of the Paladin mythos. And it's always considered a critical hit on a successful strike against supernatural evil. So this will be things like your devils and your demons, but it will not be against dragons, griffins, mystical animals, mystical creatures, fairies, anything else. Only supernatural evil. They include, but are not limited to undead, animated dead, devils, demons, and beloved. So those they're going to do critical damage, ×2 damage. And if they have a critical thing that is ×2, then this is going to make it ×3. They have something that gives them a ×3. It's going to be basically each critical adds another. Then the multiplier goes up by 1 multiplier. So this has proved to be extremely useful against demons and devils and stuff like that in my game. But sometimes they say attack a griffin, and then the critical aspect of it doesn't come into play. And it's worked out much better after I turned it into a channeling it through your weapon instead of having it be a touch, which you sheath your weapon and then you go and try to pat somebody on the head to do a bunch of damage. After I reworked everything and the game master, we started playing D&D 5th edition, I was like, oh, this is really close to their divine smite type thing. It was a happy coincidence, not something that was based off of it. I had done this before I actually looked into 5th edition rules for D&D. So happy coincidence. So then let's look at Divine Prayer Invocation. Very different than any other of my prayers magic. So in the other ones, you have magic points, ISP that fuel your prayers and your magic abilities and your psychic abilities. The Paladin cuts all of that out. The Paladin is a fighter first, a combatant first, and their prayer invocations are simplified. So they gain the ability to invoke prayers, and it's different than the priest and the cleric. Like I said, Paladin's on the martial side, priest is on the non-martial side, cleric's in the middle. So the cleric, prayer-wise, is similar or almost the same as the priest. Paladin is completely different. That at 5th level, you have a prayer level of 1. So when you cast prayers, they're going to be at level 1, not level 5. Upon each new level of experience, your prayer level goes up. So when you get to level 6, then your prayer level is level 2. At each prayer level, you choose one spell or psychic power known by your deity, because that's one of the things I like is if your deity only knows psychic stuff, let you get a psychic ability. Why not? Equivalent or lower than your prayer level, and you can't take wards and circles. That's something I do allow my clerics and my priests to take, is if their deity knows wards and circles, instead of choosing a spell, they can choose a psychic ability, a ward, or circle. With paladins, no, we want it. We don't want you doing little rituals as a paladin, or setting up. I guess we don't want you doing complex rituals. We want you doing a quick prayer, a quick invocation, and that might be a psychic effect similar to a psychic ability or prayer. So I allow that. To invoke the prayer, you use your hand-to-hand action, so they don't get a separate mystical stance. They can stay in their hand-to-hand. And they must be able to talk, and the prayer, either a spell or psychic power, is considered a prayer for purposes of saving throw. So even if they cast or invoke a psychic ability, the save versus it, instead of save versus psychic, is save versus prayer, spells or prayers. They don't have to worry about magic points. So it's done. And it falls back to how spells were originally. And only one prayer may be invoked per round. So it doesn't matter how many hand-to-hand attacks, you can convert one and one only to this special prayer attack when you're doing hand-to-hand. The Paladin may invoke prayers equal to 1 per prayer level per day. Prayers resets for at sunrise for Paladins of Light, sunset Paladins for death. So if you're level 6, you have 2 per day. If you're Paladin of Light, they reset at sunrise. If you're a Paladin of Dark, then they reset at sunset. And they are always invoked at a Paladin's prayer level and cannot be reduced. So they are the one that it's basically the deity is going, Paladin, here's your powers. This is what they do. Don't think about it outside of the box. And so, an example, 8th level Paladin has a prayer level of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, 4th level prayer level. He has 4 prayers, one for each level, chosen from his deity, spells, and or psychic powers. The first one has to be level 1. The second one can be level 1 or level 2. The third one, level 1 through 3, etc. The Paladin can invoke these prayers outside of combat or in hand-to-hand stance by using one of his hand-to-hand actions. You can only invoke one per level, or one per round. So you can't, if you have 3 attacks, you can only use one of them for a prayer. And you being prayer level 4, you invoke it at 4th level. And it will reset at either sunrise or sunset. The Paladin cannot reduce it to a lower level, as I said. You cannot end the duration early. All of that stuff applies, but any saving throws against spells prayer levels are at a 12, even if it's based off of the psychic power, and they don't gain spell strength. So it's just, no matter what level they are, the save versus that if the ability, whether it's psychic or magic, originally it's a prayer, it has a 12 base saving throw, and it doesn't go up. Penance, I've talked about that before with the cleric, is they can resist thirst up to 2 days per prayer level and hunger for up to 3 days per prayer level, because they gain penance at level 6. So it's not based off of their level like a cleric or priest, but it is based off of their prayer level. So it fit with things, and you would have to get a prayer level first at 5th level to be able to do something that requires you to have a prayer level. So that is how that is. And then it resets at sunrise for Paladins of Light, sunset for Paladins of Darkness. Then at 7th, like I said, they gain a Squire. It's not an ability, but at that level, they're kind of recognized. Somebody in the religious order will assign them and grant them a Squire. And that Squire starts at level 1, so you want to make sure the Squire doesn't die. But as you gain levels, they will gain levels. They will get up near you faster. And then as a player character, you get to control a Squire instead of a big tiger or bear or something, or a demon familiar. So that is it. The Paladin is expected to treat their Squire well, train them in religion, politics, as well as combat. And then at 14th, it's the mental conditioning. So at this level, they become impervious to all possession, mind control, including charms, gnosis, and illusions. So basically, their deity grants them complete mental shielding, and they don't have to worry about that type of thing. So that is my Palladium rewrite of the Paladin, my merge of the Paladin, Holy Crusader, my changing Harming Touch to be Harming Smite, and how I did with the per days being a reset at sunrise, sunset type thing. Having said that, I'm Liam Crafton Jr., aka Zorval John Less Than Guru, and until next time, I will catch you later.